Our gospel lesson this morning is from the Gospel of Luke, the 10th chapter, verses 25 through 37, the well-known story and parable of the Good Samaritan. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" The lawyer answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, the lawyer asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to the inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back I will repay you whatever you spend." Which of these 3, do you think, was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The lawyer said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." It sounds like a typical joke, doesn't it? 3 men walked into a bar: a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan. The priest said, "I just came from the Jericho road. As I walked along, I heard someone moaning, but I was so deep in prayer that I wasn't sure if I heard anything at all." The Levite said, "I too just arrived on the Jericho road. I saw a form lying on the edge of the road. I slowed down for a better look, but couldn't really see what was going on, so I kept right on my way, reading my scroll from the book of Isaiah." The Samaritan said, "Guys, I too was in Jericho Road and I heard some moaning. Saw something lying down there in the ditch, so I stopped and went over to see what was up. I found your friend who had been beaten and robbed, so I picked him up and carried him to the inn across the street." I don't know if it was meant to be a joke or not. Often in a really good joke, the punchline startles us, shocks us into new ways of seeing ourselves, a new way of thinking. Oh, we may laugh along with everyone else, but someplace deep inside, we know the assumptions behind the joke are wrong, and that laughter is not the correct response. If you had told me that the small suburb just outside of Minneapolis, where I taught high school choir for 11 years, a suburb with only about 8,000 citizens, where everyone knew everyone, would have a police shooting incident, where an officer or 2 shot and killed a black man sitting next to his wife and child in the car, pulled over for a broken tail light, I would have laughed and thought it's some kind of joke. That wasn't the St. Anthony Village I knew. St. Anthony Village, the city for whom the police officers worked in the news. When I taught there, I was more likely to have a student named Kukelka than Smith. He was ethnically Polish. In my 11 years, I had a total of 3, count them, 3 African-American kids in my choirs, 2 sisters and a brother. I knew they had a hard time. I talked to them about it. I tried to stop the bullying when I could, but I knew that behind the smiles of civility, there was a deep-seated prejudice for people of color. Rather than a joke, Jesus' story is a tragedy. The flaws in the characters make for the best kinds of jokes. Priests and Levites in Jesus' time would have been like ministers and lawyers in our time. We like to make fun of pastors and priests and lawyers. We set them on pedestals so we can knock them down. We silently relish reading about some fallen pastor who perhaps was caught looking for an underage prostitute. It allows us to think it's okay for me to browse the online pornography so prevalent today. I mean, at least they're just pictures, right? But deep down inside, we know that they are pictures of somebody's daughter or somebody's son. While this is likely our favorite of all of Jesus' parables, I find it disquietly troubling. Where is the justice? Are the robbers caught and tried? Is the injured man's property restored? Are the priest and the Levite ever confronted for their lack of compassion? Does the Samaritan actually go back to the inn to be certain that all the expenses were paid? And is the innkeeper put out because the Samaritan just drops this injured guy on his doorstep and expects him to take care of him for a measly 2 denarii? And don't preachers relish the opportunity to point out all the prejudices and bigotry bubbling just under the surface of his or her own congregation? Of all the weeks in this year, I just didn't need to think about the Good Samaritan this week. This week, when 2 more African American men were shot and killed by those we trust to protect and safeguard our security. But these 2 shootings are part of a long line of similar shootings. A line long enough that although I haven't heard any, I'll bet there are a growing bunch of jokes out there about the police officer and the black man as the primary characters. And I'll bet the things don't go right for the black man. Comedians have long known that the best way to make money in stand-up comedy is to focus the audience's attention on one of the well-known but little talked about prejudices in the audience. Don Rickles has made millions, and we all laugh when Jeff Foxworthy goes on to, "You might be a redneck if..." And the closer the truth gets, the harder we laugh, perhaps as a way of covering up our embarrassment. And who could have predicted that an armed forces trained shooter would find the high ground and take direct aim at as many police officers as he possibly could? And with his training and his weaponry, shoot 14 officers, men and women charged to care and keep the peace, killing 5. It frightens me that the next victim of a police shooting might be Rashad or Marcus or Antoine or Sankara. It scares me to think that one of Frankfurt's finest could be the victim of an enraged revenge. It deeply saddens me that I was forced to spend this week trying to think of something to say to you this morning, not wanting once again a sermon which plays on our guilty consciences and offers no solutions except fix it yourself. Be a Samaritan, not a minister. Friends, somehow on Tuesday, it dawned on me that I love this church, have loved it for a long time. You are good people. You are trying every day to live a faithful and grace-filled life. You are forgiving, and you overlook my forgetting. You come to church to study and grow in your faith. You come to worship, to sing and pray and practice forgiveness at Christ's table. You work together in the soup kitchen and in the church kitchen. You fill knapsacks with food for children and deliver bags for hungry families. You have a history of taking mission trips and sponsor them for our youth who return safely on Friday after spending a week in Danville, Virginia. And you do so much more. And because I've come to understand how deep my love has grown for you, I must challenge you, challenge us to become an even more safe place for everyone and anyone. We must be open and welcoming to parents with children, more open and affirming of people whose God's given disposition is to love someone whose gender matches their own, more open to people who see things politically different than we might. We must be more welcoming of persons of color, more open to persons with disabilities, more open to people who are aging gracefully and those who are struggling to age as well. We must reach out to KSU, not just for choir members, but to all the students who are away from home and looking for a place to fit in, a place that feels like home. We must continue to welcome community members to Wednesday evening fellowship, and we must surround them with the Samaritan's touch. And my beloved family, we must not just be welcoming. We must be an invitational people, inviting friends, families, and even strangers to join us and share the love and acceptance that is growing here. Wouldn't it be great if First Christian Church was the butt about jokes because we were so welcoming, so affirming, such a loving congregation, so much that we stood out, not because we're better, but because we're unafraid to take a stand with anyone who needs support, anyone who needs friendship, anyone injured on the side of the road, anyone who needs a relationship with God and Jesus Christ, because there is somebody who needs what we have not too far from here. Amen.